Okay, so welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Hi, Stephen. Pleasure to be here. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again too, sir. What I'd like to do, Chris, is would you mind telling the audience something about your background and how you ended up where you are today?
Certainly. So I'm Dr. Chris McKee. I am now the managing director for the UK for Better Medicine, and I've also launched the subsidiary of Better Medicine UK, which I actually opened up in Leeds in Nexus. But I was on a previous podcast with you, Stephen, I guess, where I actually worked in for a company called Ladidi in a similar role as managing director. And prior to that, I worked in the NHS for several years in innovation and business development. My background originally is not a medical professional. I'm a scientist by background, but it's medical sciences, PhD in cellular molecular medicine. And I did spend quite a number of years, even before going back into the NHS, public sector, working for pharma companies and large CROs such as Covance. So I've kind of dabbled with many things. I like to describe myself as a dabbler of many and a master of none. But it certainly helps with what I'm doing.
It's better to be a generalist than a master of one thing. And I think it's quite a rare fish to say that you've got a wonderful first-class PhD and you've also had great experience in the National Health Service. So you understand both the science and the management of healthcare systems.
Yes, I'm finding a few kindred spirits out there who followed a similar path, but there aren't many of us. I think the idea of being an expert generalist it has its benefits, and it means that you can certainly work with those that are much more specialists in what they do in their approach to things. So it's certainly been advantageous for me, and it helps me to understand enough to get things moving along, and then leave it to the key opinion leaders to deliver the rest, of course.
So, Chris, is the company a UK-based company?
Our company is actually an Estonian company. So quite a few of your viewers may not know much about Estonia, some may, but the way I would describe it from my experience of having been over there is it's probably one of, if not the world's most advanced sort of digital ecosystem I can think of, particularly in health. It's very, very renowned for having highly advanced e-health ecosystem, and they have been utilizing a national-based PAC system for almost 20 years, maybe at least 20 years now, and they've been using digital health solutions for a very, very long time. They're kind of where the UK wants to be in 10 years, and I'd say they've been there for 10 years already. So this has really allowed a lot of incredible innovative startups across the board really to emerge in recent years from Estonia. It's big on their agenda, and Better Medicine is one of them. The company does have a UK base. I launched the UK subsidiary last year. You can see all the details on Company House, but yes, it's originally from Estonia.
Can you provide a brief overview of how artificial intelligence is currently being used in diagnostic imaging, particularly in the fields of radiology and oncology, and how does your company approach this?
Sure. It's a bit, it's a big question, Stephen. I think it's very topical these days. When it comes to AI and diagnostic imaging, there's quite a few players that are emerging in the market. It's not really just a pipe dream like it was maybe a few years ago. It was more of a concept. I think a lot of people are quite aware of how the technology has been applied to pathology in particular. So it has been used for a number of years, but it's certainly emerging a lot more in terms of diagnostic imaging capability in radiology, especially in the field of cancer, but it's also being utilized very well for stroke, for looking at different vascular conditions and neurological conditions. So it's quite amazing, really, how it's developing. I would say, from my experience, a lot of in terms of oncology, that's probably going to be the focus from my side as we focus on predominantly on oncological imaging. I would say a lot of people are really focusing on the sort of the heavy hitters, the lungs, the breasts, the prostates. Some are starting to move into things like liver as well. So most of the major cancers are really being addressed by AI companies now when it comes to diagnostic imaging, and a lot of really powerful evidence is coming to the fore. Some good, some not so good, but leaving room for improvement. In terms of us as a company, so I work now for Better Medicine as their managing director, of course. We focus on slightly different approach to this. What we have found over the years is that the focus has really been, quite rightly so, on what we call single organ modalities. So approaching this this issue one organ at a time and providing high quality evidence per organ type. And this is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And you certainly have to start somewhere, and that's the best place to do it. But then what happens when you find primary disease? What happens when you do actually find cancer? What do the radiologists and oncologists then have to do? Well, then they have to start looking for spread of disease. Has it gone elsewhere? Is there perhaps metastases associated with primary disease? Or is this disease we found not primary disease? Is it actually a metastases from somewhere else? So our goal from the get-go at Better Medicine has been to actually take a full body approach from the outset. And I'm sure we can talk plenty more about that throughout the podcast.
Okay, so aligned to this, what are some of the trends emerging in this field?
So what we're finding really in this space, in my opinion, is a lot of AI is being utilized for screening programs. So a lot more lung solutions are actually being embedded either using X-rays or CT scans for screening, for early detection of cancer. There's a lot also being utilized in breast mammography. I think some of the greatest successes of using AI in imaging have been in breast mammography, and there's a lot of amazing work going on in the UK alone, focusing on this. And there are some brilliant companies making strides towards that. So I think the major advancements have really been towards utilizing this technology in screening and to an extent for standard diagnostic pathways within the oncology services. So I think that's kind of where we are, but there's actually quite a lot of space that hasn't been tapped into yet.
So what are the key benefits that AI brings to diagnostic imaging? And conversely, what challenges or concerns does the integration pose for healthcare professionals in radiology and oncology?
Certainly. I think the biggest improvement that this really can bring is to address the underlying issues that are really a global problem in terms of radiological workflows and services. There are regions of the world where they don't even have qualified radiologists or even radiographers to help support their workflows, which is where actually AI is going to have a huge benefit in the developing world. But even in what we call the developed world, there aren't enough of these professionals to match the service demand. There are far too many images coming forwards now, far too many scans being taken for the workforce that exists today, whether that's in America, the UK, or anywhere else really, in order for them to keep up the pace. The supply and demand are just not matched up, and the problem is actually getting worse. This gap is broadening, it's getting wider. There are a few approaches to this which are being implemented, such as community diagnostic centres coming in the UK, the emergence of diagnostic radiographers, but ultimately the problem remains the same. There are too many roadblocks in the workflow. A lot of the practice is what I would really call 20th century medicine, and this is where AI really is here to come and help. It's there to be a tool to help with these efficiencies, to help get to the answers quicker, to be consistent as well. I mean, AI doesn't really have an off day. It has days where there's bugs in the system, but it doesn't really have a day where it's not feeling so good and days where it feels better. So it's a very consistent process. So there are huge amounts of opportunities using AI, should we get this right. Now,
So what are you
yes.
finding are the important benefits and the important impacts that are being considered and accepted by the clinical community when it comes to these diagnostics?
I think from my experience, just talking to clinical professionals, bearing in mind that I'm not a medic by background, but what I'm finding is that they're particularly keen on other user-based feedback combined with the typical data they want to see, high levels of specificity, high levels of accuracy. But I think one thing that they're particularly keen on is actually hearing from other medical professionals who've used the tools, so that there's credibility within the ecosystem of of the solutions that are being put on the table. It's completely reasonable for them to be cautious about this technology, and it's completely reasonable for them to think that this technology might actually replace them to an extent. It won't. These solutions are going to be there as a tool. I like to describe it as the difference between having a scientific calculator and not having one. People were perfectly good at maths at one point in time, but just took them longer to get to the answer. The advent of solutions such as the scientific calculator allowed them to get to that answer quicker, but it certainly doesn't auto-generate that answer. And the AI is really there as a powerful tool to help them. But I think they need to see it more in practice. I think clinical professionals want to really see how this tool will impact their workflows, and that it can be accurate and good enough to show improved patient outcomes.
So, how do AI technologies collaborate with healthcare professionals,
Mm,
such as radiologists and oncologists?
yes. They well, they it's directly. The collaboration is always for mutual benefits. The AI companies and solutions they really need to come to the table with an offering that addresses their unmet needs. This is the only way that it can work. I think AIs that come forwards and state that they can be used alone without the need of any radiology professional or other healthcare professionals will probably find it difficult to penetrate certain markets because they always need to have the healthcare professional involved. So those companies that are succeeding the most are taking this very seriously and are really taking that approach of direct collaboration and providing a solution that benefits them. In some ways, it's not really different than any other medical device or medical technology. It's just the idea that artificial intelligence is being brought to the table. That's kind of a new approach to this. But realistically, it's still just a tool, and it's a tool to help them get where they need to go. And I think it's showing a lot of promise in that field.
So, in your opinion, what role does each party play, and why is collaboration between all of these parties important?
Certainly, Stephen. So the roles that the each party seems to play in this, in my opinion, are kind of what you would expect. So the healthcare professionals are taking the leading role in this. They are the ultimate decision makers. They are the people who are actually part of this process. They bring the human touch, the empathy of medicine, really, into the table. Whereas the AI, at least in its current form, can't do that. It's very direct. It's very logical. What the AI is doing in this partnership is it's just providing them with set of tools, the equipment that's needed in order for people to make decisions and to some ways sleep better at night. I remember someone telling me when it came to radiology professionals, they have a huge pile of work to get through during the day, whether it's a radiographer or a radiologist. And anywhere in that pile could be someone who has a condition or cancer, let's say, that needs to be seen to rapidly. But they can't triage it effectively. They have to just get through it. And if they don't get through that pile by the end of the day, they could easily go home worried about the outcome of that. AI has the power to come and help them at least get through that workflow, not just quicker, but also in a more effective triage-based approach if it's designed the right way. So they each have their roles to play, but the outcome is always the same: improved patient outcomes, better treatment decisions, and ensuring that a human being is always part of the process.
So, looking ahead, what's the potential future and the developments in the application of AI diagnostic imaging for the radiologist and the oncologist?
Mm. So I think there's an interesting future ahead of us. My personal view is that these sort of individual AI companies will eventually start to amalgamate and fuse together and become part of a cohort. I think the idea of a platform of solutions is becoming more and more popular. I was lucky enough to attend an event up in Edinburgh just over a week ago, where I saw some amazing work taking place up at Greater Glasgow and Clyde and other regions of Scotland, where they are moving towards a platform approach. And I know this is the approach that was being looked at uh, in the Leeds Teaching Hospital where I used to work. So I think this is where the future of these solutions is going to go. I think different companies have different things to offer. For example, from our side, we are about to launch the probably the world's first that we are aware, world's first kidney cancer AI diagnostic solution to the market, and therefore it makes sense for people to collaborate when it comes to things like kidney cancer. So we would then perhaps go in as part of a wider cohort. So I think that's what we're going to start to see. The the um, the companies that show promise and high quality will ultimately get absorbed into a bigger conglomerate.
So how might these advancements shape the future of healthcare in these particular fields, oncology and radiology?
I think it'll improve it. There are some valid concerns that I think should be mentioned really in this talk, but I think overall it will improve things. I think it will mean that people are seen to quicker, that they are treated hopefully more accurately and perhaps in an even more personalized manner. And I do think that it will help to alleviate burdens on healthcare systems, whether that's in public healthcare systems in the UK and the NHS, or even in more private and insurance-based models in the US, where they're still finding similar issues. Um, but I do think that the technology can leave us a little bit open to bias and just assuming that the AI is always right. It very often is correct, but there's we have to be aware that it could ultimately affect, I guess, the underlying behaviors of medical professionals to become perhaps overly reliant on AI. So there needs to be maybe some additional training or processes that need to be implemented alongside this as this becomes more heavily regulated to ensure that over reliance on AI doesn't become the next problem. So we don't want to necessarily replace one problem with another, do we? So I think we need to think very strongly about that. And now that the regulations are starting to become much more stringent and locked down across the board, I think there is opportunity to do so.
I see a relationship with pharmacy manufacturers. Is that something you see as well?
Yes, definitely. I'm really glad you brought that up, actually, Stephen. As for me, I think an area that's been relatively untapped is to work with pharmaceutical companies. The reason being is that this technology can be utilized at all stages of their clinical trial development pathway, as well as also looking at post-market surveillance. I am a very big believer that this technology can be used in more than just clinical settings. In fact, when I used to work in the NHS, one of the key rate limiting steps to any clinical trial was actually to get sign off from radiology, and it was almost always down to capacity. I know that certain pharma companies have either brought their own professionals in, some are not even radiology professionals, to read scans as part of the trial. But I really think AI would be a much better approach to this. I know there are certain companies that we are talking to that take the approach of bringing like a AI platform approach to managing clinical trials, but they're not yet using AI imaging solutions within that setting, but they want to. And this is something that I'm really wanting to tap into. I see huge benefits from it. And interestingly enough, because it really is, it's not even a diagnostic tool that it's being used for. It's really just looking at the effectiveness of the treatment and how the patients are going through the trial. It doesn't necessarily even have to be CE marked. It just has to meet certain other appropriate accreditations. So there is a huge potential there to tap into, and we are definitely here and ready to tap into it.
There are 4 countries in the European Union that have a very special pathway for in vitro companion diagnostic.
Mm.
And they've recently modified their pathways to include AI. 3 of those countries have just introduced reimbursement for 4 AI solutions that have become companion diagnostics. I see this as an opportunity for your company, definitely, and a number of other companies across the European Union. And I think that you'll see the progression of this over time with the success of these 3 projects that are going on in Germany, in Belgium, and in the Netherlands, and now a new project in AI beginning in Sweden next week for reimbursement. So I think what you've actually got is something that will, yes, it'll diagnose, but it'll also show the efficacy of treatment, which is obviously something that pharma and doctors are very interested in.
I think from our side, to highlight the technology we're bringing to the table, we are focusing really on the CT scans, particularly contrast enhanced CT scans, but also looking more and more at low dose and native based CT scans as our approach to addressing the issues with diagnostic imaging in radiology, particularly for oncological purposes. But there are technologies that are utilizing almost every type of image you can think of. There's incredible AIs emerging using MRI scans. There are quite a lot of focusing on the utilization of X-rays, particularly to benefit screening processes. So when we're talking about AI diagnostic imaging, we really are talking about a plethora of companies and opportunities with all these different imaging types, which is again, it brings me back to that idea that actually I think people are going to go in as almost a collaborative cohort, offering different pieces of the puzzle in the pathway to help out. And I think it's definitely worth mentioning that.
I think also, Chris, your technology can be used retrospectively and prospectively. So that allows the opportunity for research and to go back over patient records, I think.
That is correct, yes. We have quite an interesting approach to how we develop our AI in and of itself. I can't really tell you too much yet because it's patent pending, but the idea is ultimately that we have developed essentially an AI to help churn out more AI, because the difficulty is very often it's a manual approach to looking at retrospective images to even build your AI model in the first place. But you can actually utilize AI in that step of the pathway. So we're able to churn out rapid models, and the reason being is because of the full body approach to what we're trying to do here. We are really trying to make sure we have an offering of workflow solutions and diagnostic solutions in tandem that can come in, utilize retrospective data to further enhance or to develop new models, but also prospective data to show that it's working clinically, so that we can perform clinical service evaluations and real world evaluations where appropriate in a live setting alongside clinical professionals who are recruiting patients into this.
So Chris, what about robotic surgery? Is that something that you've looked at?
So from our perspective, where our technology is not suitable for robotic surgery, but there are other technologies that are out there. As you know, Stephen, I used to work in innovation, so I've come across lots of different solutions. And the benefit of using technologies for robotic surgery is that they have to be in real time. They have to essentially be overlaid. And there are solutions out there that are coming in to allow for sort of real-time navigation and monitoring of patients during surgery. And not just surgery, it can be utilized for radiotherapy as well. In fact, the radiotherapists are looking at AI for their own purposes, not just the radiologists. They have their own role in this. They do sometimes need to remark up images that have already been assessed, because they have different things that they're looking for, different measurements they require in order to deliver appropriate radiotherapy approaches. Surgery can be very broad. It could be for ablation of tumors. That's becoming more and more routine. In fact, our partner who we're working with in Leeds, Professor Zemin War, is an ablation specialist, and she is obviously a radiologist as well, but she's an interventional radiologist. So surgery is beyond just going in and chopping a tumor out, but it all comes down to, if you are going to bring digital solutions to the surgical table, if I may say, then you want them to be in real time. You want them to have that navigational capability. And if you are going to even bring AI to that table, it needs to enable and aid people using either robotic solutions or by hand, or using solutions by hand.
I wasn't aware of that. That's fantastic. Thank you. Have you got any installations you'd like to talk about?
So at the moment, we're still a startup. We're in early stages. Our first product is about to be CE marked this year, but we are working with some exciting institutions. So we've clinically validated our kidney model with Tartu University Hospital in Estonia, and also alongside Tartu University itself, where our chief scientific officer is based. That is a world-renowned university of extremely high quality in terms of research and academic output. We've also we have a small partnership within Estonia and also with Pärnu Hospital over there, or a lung screening program that's about to emerge in Estonia, and it's being partially funded for a small amount by AstraZeneca as well, who've taken an interest in the screening program over there. So our lung screening model is also not CE marked, but it's certainly usable for the sort of clinical validation based studies, and that is one of them. Our other relationships stretch as far as South Africa at the moment. We have some interesting relationships in Johannesburg, who are currently trialing out our solution for telemedicine-based purposes. And in the UK, it's early days, but we do have some relations with the Leeds Teaching Hospital NHS Trust, where I used to work. And there's quite a few others in the pipeline, which I can't talk about yet, but we will have some marketing materials coming out hopefully later this month to show some more examples of who we're working with.
All right, absolutely perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure as always engaging, and it's good to hear your brilliance. And I'm sure you'll be very successful.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure.